The living room buzzed with the familiar chaos of Sunday family dinner at Mom's house. My sister Rachel lounged on the sectional, scrolling through her phone while her three kids, Madison, 12, Connor, 10, and little Sophia, 7, bounced around the room like pinballs. My own two children, Emma and Jake, sat quietly on the floor by the coffee table, coloring in their books with the kind of focused concentration that only comes from being well-behaved kids who know the rules. According to YouTube analytics, 99.3% of viewers are not subscribed. That's a huge number. By subscribing the channel that is completely free, you'll help support the channel and never miss fresh content. All right, everyone, Mom announced, clapping her hands together. We're ordering Chinese tonight. What does everyone want? I watched as she immediately turned to Madison. Sweetie, what would you like? Orange chicken, Madison chirped without looking up from her tablet. And Connor? Beef and broccoli, but no broccoli, he said, making a face. Mom laughed. Of course, honey. And little Sophia? Sweet and sour pork. Sophia giggled, spinning in circles. I waited. Emma looked up hopefully, her crayon poised mid-air. Jake had stopped coloring entirely, watching the exchange with those quiet, observant eyes that reminded me so much of myself at his age. Mom pulled out her phone and started typing in the order. Rachel, your usual lo mein? Extra spicy, Rachel confirmed, not looking up. The silence stretched. Emma's hand slowly lowered. Jake blinked and returned to his coloring book, but I could see the slight slump in his small shoulders. Mom, I said carefully, what about Emma and Jake? She looked up, genuinely surprised. Oh, right. What do you two want? Before my kids could answer, Madison piped up again. Can I get an egg roll too? And maybe some of those fried wontons? Of course, a sweetheart, Mom said, already typing again. I felt something cold settle in my stomach. This wasn't the first time. In fact, as I sat there watching my mother fuss over Rachel's children while mine waited patiently to be acknowledged, I realized it had become a pattern so ingrained that everyone, except me, seemed to take it for granted. At Christmas, Rachel's kids had opened their presents first, second, and last. Mine had waited. At birthday parties, Rachel's children were served cake first. Mine had waited. During family photos, Rachel's kids were positioned front and center. Mine were shifted to the sides, afterthoughts in their own family portraits. Emma wants chicken lo mein, I said finally, my voice steady. And Jake likes the sweet and sour chicken. Got it, Mom said, but she was already distracted by Connor demanding to know if he could have a soda with dinner. As the adults continued planning the evening around Rachel's family, I watched my children. Emma had gone back to coloring, but her strokes were heavier now, more aggressive. Jake was being extra careful to stay inside the lines, that particular kind of perfectionist behavior he exhibited when he was trying very hard to be good enough to be noticed. They were used to waiting. They were used to being the afterthought, the addendum to the real family gathering. And I was suddenly, blazingly angry that they had learned to accept this as normal. The realization hit me like a physical blow. This wasn't just about takeout orders or seating arrangements. This was about my children learning that their needs, their wants, their very existence was somehow less important than their cousins. They were learning to shrink themselves, to wait patiently while others were served first, to be grateful for whatever attention was left over. And I had let it happen. For 2 years since Rachel's divorce, when she'd moved back home with the kids, I had watched this dynamic develop and told myself it was temporary, that Mom was just trying to help Rachel through a difficult time, that it would balance out eventually. But it hadn't balanced out. It had calcified into a hierarchy where Rachel's children were the priority and mine were the polite, patient afterthoughts. The food arrived an hour later. Mom bustled around the kitchen, unpacking containers and calling out items. Madison's orange chicken, Connor's beef without the broccoli, Sophia's sweet and sour pork. The three cousins crowded around the kitchen island, grabbing plates and loading up. Rachel emerged from wherever she'd been scrolling through social media to help herself to lo mein. "Emma, Jake," I called softly. "Come get your dinner." They approached the kitchen cautiously, waiting for the crowd to clear. By the time they reached the counter, the good serving spoons were gone, replaced by small plastic ones. The orange chicken was nearly demolished, leaving mostly sauce and a few small pieces. The rice containers were running low. "Is there enough sweet and sour chicken for Jake?" I asked, peering into the container. "Oh," Mom said, looking flustered. "I think Connor grabbed some of that too by mistake. Jake, honey, would you like some of the beef instead?" Jake, 8 years old and trying so hard to be accommodating, nodded. "That's okay, Grandma." But I had reached my limit. "Actually, no," I said, my voice carrying across the suddenly quiet kitchen. "It's not okay." Everyone turned to look at me. Rachel raised an eyebrow. Mom looked confused. The kids sensed something shifting in the adult dynamic and grew still. Jake ordered sweet and sour chicken. That's what he should get. I reached for my purse. "I'm going to order more food." "Sarah, don't be ridiculous," Rachel said. "There's plenty of food here. Jake can eat the beef." "Why should Jake eat the beef when Connor took his sweet and sour chicken?" I asked evenly. "Connor's just a kid." Rachel shrugged. "He doesn't understand." "Jake is also just a kid," I interrupted. "A kid who ordered something specific, and then watched his cousin take it while the adults in this family made excuses." The silence was deafening. Mom was staring at me like I'd grown a second head. Rachel's expression had shifted from dismissive to annoyed. "You're being dramatic," Rachel said. "It's just Chinese food." "You're right," I said, pulling out my phone. "It is just Chinese food. So it shouldn't be a problem for me to order exactly what my children asked for." I called the restaurant back and placed a second order. Sweet and sour chicken for Jake. Extra chicken lo mein for Emma, since most of hers had somehow ended up on Connor's plate. I ordered enough for generous portions, plus some extra items I knew my kids loved, but had never requested in this house because they'd learned not to ask for too much. While we waited for the second delivery, the family ate their dinner in uncomfortable silence. Emma and Jake sat with small portions of whatever was left, picking at their food. I didn't eat anything. When the doorbell rang again, I got up to answer it. "Sarah," Mom said, her voice carrying a warning tone. "This is unnecessary." "Is it?" I asked, setting the new containers on the counter. "Jake, Emma, come get your actual dinner." I served my children generous portions of exactly what they had ordered. Their faces lit up in a way that broke my heart. Not because they were happy about the food, but because they were so surprised by the simple act of being prioritized. "This is ridiculous," Rachel said, her voice rising. "You're making a scene over nothing." "Am I?" I asked, sitting down next to my children. "Let me ask you something, Rachel. When was the last time your kids had to wait for anything in this house? When was the last time they were told to be patient while other children were served first?" She opened her mouth to respond, then closed it. "When was the last time Madison had to make do with someone else's choice because her preference wasn't available? When did Connor last have to settle for whatever was left over?" "That's different," she started. "How is it different?" "My kids have been through a lot with the divorce." "And my kids haven't been through anything? They haven't watched their grandmother forget their names when placing takeout orders? They haven't sat quietly in corners during family gatherings while their cousins run the show? They haven't learned to never ask for seconds because they might be taking food away from their more important cousins?" Mom finally found her voice. "Sarah, I think you're overreacting." "Am I, Mom? Tell me, what are Emma's favorite foods?" She blinked. "Well, she's not picky." What's Jake's favorite color? Another pause. Blue? No. Green? It's red, Mom. It's been red since he was 4. He wears red shirts to every family gathering. His backpack is red. His bike is red. I felt my voice getting tighter. What grade is Emma in? 4th grade, Mom said quickly. 3rd. She's in 3rd grade. Connor is in 4th grade. You know that because you helped him with his math homework last week. But you don't know what grade your other granddaughter is in. The weight of the realization was settling over the room like a heavy blanket. Rachel was no longer looking annoyed. She was starting to look uncomfortable. Mom's face was cycling through confusion, defensiveness, and something that might have been shame. I love all my grandchildren equally, Mom began. No, you don't, I said quietly. And that's not entirely your fault. Rachel moved in here with her kids during a crisis, and everyone rallied around them. That's what families do. But somewhere along the way, it stopped being temporary support and became permanent hierarchy. My children became the visiting grandchildren in their own family. I looked around the room at the evidence I'd been blind to for so long. Rachel's kids' artwork covered the refrigerator. Their school photos were prominently displayed on the mantel. Their toys were scattered around the living room. There wasn't a single trace of Emma or Jake's presence in this house where they spent every Sunday and most holidays. When Connor lost his first tooth here, you made a big celebration and put it under the pillow for the tooth fairy, I continued. When Emma lost her first tooth here 3 months later, you told her she should wait until she got home because the tooth fairy doesn't visit houses where kids don't live. Mom's face crumpled a little. I didn't mean... When Madison had a school concert, everyone rearranged their schedules to go. When Jake had his first soccer game, no one could make it because it conflicted with Connor's birthday party. The birthday party that was scheduled 2 days after Connor's actual birthday specifically because it was more convenient for everyone else. The list could have gone on. The Christmas morning when Rachel's kids were allowed to open presents at their own pace, while mine were told to wait until their cousins were finished, because it would be too chaotic otherwise. The Easter egg hunt where Rachel's kids got multiple baskets and mine had to share one because they don't mind sharing, they're so good about it. We had trained my children to be grateful for less. We had taught them that their needs were negotiable while their cousins' needs were sacred. And they had learned the lesson so well that they never complained, never demanded better treatment, never made a fuss. They just waited. I think, I said slowly, watching Emma carefully distribute her lo mein noodles and Jake savor his sweet and sour chicken. We need to make some changes. What kind of changes? Rachel asked, her defensive posture returning. The kind where my children stop being afterthoughts in their own family. Over the next hour, I laid out a new set of expectations. Family dinners would involve asking all the children what they wanted, in age order, not preference order. Gift-giving occasions would be equitable. Family photos would include everyone prominently. Most importantly, my children's needs and wants would be treated with the same respect and urgency as their cousins. Rachel pushed back, of course. You can't just completely restructure how this family works because you're having some kind of crisis. I'm not restructuring anything, I said calmly. I'm asking for basic fairness for my children. If that seems like a complete restructuring, maybe that tells us something about how unfair things have become. Mom, to her credit, looked genuinely shaken by the conversation. I didn't realize... I never meant for Emma and Jake to feel left out. Intentions don't matter as much as impact, Mom. The impact has been that my children have learned they matter less than their cousins. I won't let them learn that lesson anymore. The evening ended with tentative agreements and uncomfortable tensions. Rachel gathered her children and their various belongings scattered throughout the house. Mom hugged Emma and Jake a little tighter than usual, and I saw her really looking at them, maybe for the first time in months. As we drove home, Emma was quiet for a long time before asking, Mom, why did you order us more food tonight? Because you deserve to get what you asked for, sweetheart. But we could have eaten the other stuff. You could have. But you shouldn't have had to. Jake piped up from the back seat. Are you mad at Grandma and Aunt Rachel? I considered the question carefully. I'm not mad at them, buddy. But I was sad that they weren't treating you and Emma fairly, and I decided that needed to change. Are we still going to Sunday dinner? Yes, but Sunday dinner is going to be different now, and it was different. It took time, months of consistent boundary setting, uncomfortable conversations, and gradual shifts in family dynamics. Rachel eventually moved into her own apartment, which helped reset the household hierarchy. Mom made a conscious effort to learn about Emma and Jake's lives, interests, and needs. The changes weren't always smooth. There were arguments about favoritism accusations and disrupted family traditions. Rachel accused me of being jealous and vindictive. Some extended family members thought I was making mountains out of molehills, but my children stopped shrinking themselves. Emma started speaking up when she wanted something. Jake began asking for seconds at family dinners. They learned to expect fairness rather than being grateful for scraps. The real victory came 6 months later, at Connor's 9th birthday party. When it came time for cake, Mom served the birthday boy first, as it should be, and then served the other children in the order they were sitting, without regard to whose kids they were. Emma got her piece third. Jake got his fifth. Madison got her sixth. No one waited while others were prioritized. No one was forgotten or served last by default. Everyone got cake. Everyone sang the birthday song. Everyone was equally part of the celebration. As I watched my children laugh and play with their cousins, completely integrated into the family gathering instead of hovering on the periphery, I realized something important. Standing up for them hadn't just changed how others treated them. It had changed how they saw themselves. They no longer expected to wait while others were served first. They no longer accepted being afterthoughts as natural and normal. They had learned that their needs mattered, that their voices deserved to be heard, and that someone would always fight to make sure they were treated fairly. That night, as I tucked Jake into bed, he looked up at me with those serious eyes and said, "Mom, thank you for getting me the sweet and sour chicken." "You're welcome, buddy. Not just tonight. I mean all the times you make sure I get what I ask for now." My throat tightened. "You should always get what you ask for when it's reasonable, Jake." "You don't have to thank me for that." He considered this gravely. "But before, we used to wait a lot." "Yeah, you did. But you don't have to wait anymore." He smiled then, the kind of smile that reaches all the way to a child's eyes. I like not waiting. As I turned off his light and closed his door, I reflected on the strange journey that had started with a simple Chinese food order and ended with my children learning they deserve to take up space in their own family. Sometimes the most important battles are fought over the smallest moments, and sometimes standing up for what's right looks like something as simple as making sure your child gets the sweet and sour chicken they asked for. The takeout containers from that night were long gone, but the lesson remained. Everyone deserves a place at the table, and everyone deserves to be served with the same care and attention. It had taken me too long to realize my children were waiting for that basic respect, but I was grateful I had finally learned to stop letting them wait. In the end, it wasn't really about Chinese food at all. It was about making sure my children knew they mattered as much as anyone else in the room, and that someone would always notice if they were being overlooked. They would never have to wait like that again.